Make no mistake, we will win.
Yeah, Kamala Harris, very confident over the weekend. They are no longer the underdogs, according to the campaign. Feeling good, feeling really good. I hope you had a great weekend. I have a very special show for you today and tomorrow, where I'll get a whole bunch of different viewpoints. I reach out to our friend Bill B. in D.C., as well as David Daley, who's a writer for The New Republic, an author and former editor of Salon.com. Then I got Professor Eric Segall joining me, and leading it all off, I've got from the Daily Beans, Mueller She Wrote, it's Allison Gill, Dr. Allison Gill, joining me as well. 4 different takes on the day before the election. I hope you appreciate it. If you want to jump to the interviews, you can skip the news and headlines and clips and jump to 21 minutes. But I hope you will stay. I hope you had a good weekend, and either we're out canvassing, trying to get out the vote, or doing whatever you could to distract you. I'll be here with you today and tomorrow. I'll be going live, I think, around 7 p.m. on election day, election night, and we'll, I'm sure, go late into the night, supporting each other, hopefully celebrating and relieving all of that stress that we have built up for, well, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years? How long has it been? I'm here for you. You're here for me. And that's what the stand-up community is, and I'm so happy to have you joining us. Also, welcome to new subscribers, Todd Varney and Megan Mitchell. Saw those coming in over the weekend, as well as Robert Schillinger signed up, I think, on Thursday. Welcome to you guys. If I've missed the shout-outs, I am sorry. I'm very happy to have all of you as paying subscribers. I cannot do the show without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic now. All right, here we are just hours before the outcome of the election will be hopefully determined. I'm hoping it doesn't get dragged out. I'm hoping it's not that close. I'm hoping it is a landslide victory for Kamala Harris, and we elect the first woman, the first black woman ever to be the president of the United States. I'm hoping to be able to see that with my daughters and yours and you. So that's where we're at. It's just a few hours away. I decided I'd get 4 different takes, and that's coming up. But I've also got your headlines and a whole bunch of clips from the weekend, as I do pretty much every weekday here on Stand Up. First of all, did you fall back an hour to standard time yesterday? It's the semi-annual changing of the clocks. Most of us fell back to standard time after nearly 8 months in daylight savings time. The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, I think, and it really doesn't matter. I'm against it. Where are you on that? A shock poll. Kamala Harris grabbed a last-minute lead in Iowa over Trump, which has had everybody talking over the weekend, as did Kamala Harris's surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live, which was just pitch perfect alongside Maya Rudolph, who's just so poised and talented herself. So good. We learned what the Trump-empowered RFK Jr. would do on healthcare. He wants to ban abortion and get rid of fluoride in our water, which is a public health miracle and has prevented cavities for generations of Americans. A lot of people interpreted comments by Donald Trump saying that Liz Cheney was a war hawk who should be sent to a combat zone as a threat. I didn't see that way. I thought it was pretty straightforward. He was saying Liz Cheney's a war hawk, and if she wants to vote for war, she should have to go to a combat zone. Certainly wasn't very articulate when he said 9 guns. You saw that quote. I don't know. I think people misinterpreted that. I'm not going to make a big deal or give the guy any credit. I thought that was a little bit ridiculous what people were saying, because I thought, let's not let Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney off the hook for being war hawks. I mean, Trump is wrong about everything, but they are war hawks. So I don't know what to tell you. In a legal win for Democrats, the Supreme Court will let some Pennsylvania voters cast provisional ballots in person if election workers reject their mail ballots. Bad job numbers, by the way. The last job numbers before the election came out, and U.S. employers added just 12,000 jobs last month, apparently, far fewer than forecast, as a Boeing labor strike and hurricanes affected businesses. Thought it was interesting to see rapper Cardi B campaigning with Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. She said she hadn't planned to vote this year, but that Harris's entry into the race changed her mind, and I'm sure she's not alone. Kamala Harris trying to recapture working-class voters who have slipped away from Democrats, even though they seem likely to favor Trump again. We'll see what happens with that. A federal jury found a former Louisiana, Kentucky detective who shot Breonna Taylor in her apartment on 2020 guilty of violating her rights. The guy's name is Brett Hankinson. So another police officer being brought to justice. I like to see it. The mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, set to stand trial on corruption charges in April. He's pled not guilty. Apparently, Russia now making steadier gains in eastern Ukraine than U.S. officials had anticipated, deepening a sense of pessimism as Ukraine's military struggles to recruit soldiers. I haven't been talking about that much, but I will, hopefully, after the election more. The death toll from a flooding, this horrible flooding in Spain, if you've seen it, just absolutely horrific, rose to 205 people now dead, dozens of people still missing. And here's some good news. Pizza Hut is still a restaurant. How about that? They've had this literacy program for 40 years. They celebrated their 40th anniversary. They've reached more than 70 million students. I think that's great. Good job, Pizza Hut. I didn't even know you were still a thing. And Starbucks, speaking of chain corporate restaurants, has announced they will no longer charge extra for milk alternatives, an effort to improve slowing sales, apparently. So thought that was an interesting headline to read you. But yeah, everything right now is pretty much dominated by the election. I think it's fair to say in the news. Nearly half of 2020's electorate have already cast ballots in 2024, according to Axios and other news outlets. More than 75 million Americans have already cast their ballots as of the Sunday before Election Day. That's over 48% of the total number who voted in 2020, which is 154 million Americans who voted, indicating that early and mail-in voting has become increasingly popular methods to vote and become a new normal in American politics. And I think that is good news, because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I think we have amazing election security. But that's just me. And, well, actually most Americans, I think. Oh, no. TGI Fridays has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection Saturday, becoming the latest in a series of once high-flying casual dining chains to fall into turmoil. Oh, sorry to hear that. And yesterday was the New York City Marathon. And I don't know who won. I didn't pay much attention to it other than shout out to our longtime friend, supporter, listener, my friend Nick Martino. Congratulations to Nick Martino for completing the New York City Marathon. Normally that would be big news if Dr. Barry Hummel, who's Nick Martino's friend, didn't run an ultra marathon. So Nick's over here running 26 miles and old Barry's running 50 miles just to overshadow him. Congratulations to both you guys, both amazing guys. Very happy to have you in this community and want to give you both shout outs. We celebrate your accomplishments and everybody's. All right, those are the headlines I've gathered for you as I do every day. Send me what stories you think are undercovered or the most impactful. Those are the standards I'm looking for here on headlines. Let's get to the clips now. Lots of sound that I've gathered for you. Let's start with Kamala Harris talking about the Middle East and Gaza. She's been spending a lot of time in Michigan where there's a lot of Arab and Muslim voters. But here is one of the closing arguments that she's making on this issue to voters that care.
By leaders of the Arab American community, which has deep and proud roots here in Michigan. This year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza. To bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination. And we continue to work on a diplomatic resolution across the Israel-Lebanon border to protect civilians and provide lasting stability. Toward a future with security and dignity for all people.
All right, not much. I don't know. Who knows? Pretty boilerplate. I don't believe it, but she's got to say it, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, hopefully, we'll be able to put pressure on her on that issue once she's elected. Now, let's move to her answer to reporters talking about the fact that Trump is already cheating and making up bullshit about the election, and what's her reaction to it?
In 2020, just his comments in the past few days seem to suggest, that he's thinking about it. How will you and your campaign respond if he does the same thing again?
So here we are on the Sunday before the election, and I would ask
in particular people who have not yet voted, to not fall for his tactic, which I think includes suggesting to people that if they vote, their vote won't matter. Suggesting to people that somehow the integrity of our voting system is not intact so that they don't vote. And again, I think that it is a tactic. It is meant to distract from the fact that we have and support free and fair elections in our country. We did in 2020. He lost. And the systems that are in place for this election in 2024 have integrity. They are good systems, and the vote of the people will determine the outcome of this election, and everyone must know that their vote is their power to determine the outcome of the election, and their vote will count. It does matter.
Yeah, and in case you need any more evidence of what the strategy has always been, here is Steve Bannon just before the 2020 election saying exactly what the strategy was going to be. He was no longer working for Trump at this point, but he lays it out pretty clearly if you can tolerate his horrible, horrible vampire voice.
And what Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner. The Democrats, more of our people vote early that count. Theirs voted mail. And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. Also, if Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier. No, because he's going to sit right there and say they stole it.
Agree.
I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. It's going to be no. He's not going out easy. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
And that's exactly what he did, and I'm sure he's going to try to do that again. Thank you to Steve Bannon, or Dracula. All right, now here is President Obama on the campaign trail. I love how exasperated he was trying to explain this to folks in the crowd there and listening here.
And when he's challenged on this point, Trump will brag about, well, look at gas prices. They were $2 a gallon when I was in office. You know why gas was so cheap? Because there was a global lockdown during COVID, and nobody was driving. And he's talking about it like it was the good old days. I want us to remember that. Yes, gas was super cheap because we were stuck inside the house. Nobody was buying gas.
There you go. That's President Obama on the campaign trail trying to explain to people why gas was so cheap when Trump was president. Oh, and I like this quip from Tim Walz over the weekend.
Now, Donald Trump said you shouldn't worry about this. If you're a woman, he'll be your protector. Donald Trump will be your protector. He can't even open the door to a garbage truck, let alone...
All right, there you go. Now let's go to Republican former governor of North Dakota. This is Doug Burgum. He is a huge advocate, surrogate for Donald Trump, and he gets pretty thoroughly embarrassed on his appearance in Meet the Press. I mean, I don't think he realized it, but we all do who watched it or listened to this clip.
The voters in the country garbage, President Biden. I mean, I think this shows two things. One, it's the disrespect of this administration for Americans and their concerns, whether it's the border, whether it's inflation, but it also reflects what we've seen is that that Vice President Harris was part of this cover-up of Joe Biden's capacity.
Well, speaking of that, Governor, former President Trump had this to say back in September on that point about garbage. Listen.
It's not her. It's the people that surround her. They're scum. They're scum. And they want to take down our country. They are absolute garbage.
So, Governor, is it hypocritical to fixate on President Biden's comments, considering Donald Trump used the word garbage to describe Kamala Harris's supporters?
Well, I think what we're seeing here again this week, and whether the parsing of comments from the last 7 days is not what's going to determine the election. I mean, I would.
What a stammering mess Doug Burgum was at that moment. I love that. And you know who isn't? The great Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation. He was on Fox News with Neil Cavuto doing what he does best.
Right, she also called him a fascist. That's no way to break bread and make peace.
Well, she said, she said that she did not disagree with his chief of staff who said that, somebody who knows him well. And again,
do you think, Mayor, that
Kelly
Donald Trump is a fascist? Do you think he's that?
I don't think General Kelly is wrong. He knows Donald Trump much better than I do, and I would not contradict General Kelly in his assessment of his former boss.
Well done. Let's get a little bit more from that interview.
Look, we've never seen a president have his own chief of staff or his own vice president not support him. And by the same token, we've never seen a Democrat have that many Republicans who do support her. But I think the most important thing is the difference in the closing message between him talking about turning guns on people who disagree with them, and her saying that if you're a Republican, you will have a seat at the table in my administration.
There you go, Pete Buttigieg going on Fox News with Neil Cavuto and doing a great job as always. Such a great surrogate for, well, anybody. And here is someone who's not a great surrogate. This is absolutely hilarious. This is Herschel Walker campaigning for Donald Trump, and he says the wrong name. He says Donald Trump Jr., and then he says, Jonald Jump. It is, and then he just races off. He just scampers off the stage. You got to hear it.
And it is time for it to stop. And it stopped on Tuesday when we get to the polls and we vote for my friend and your friend, Donald Trump Jr.
Yeah.
Donald J. Trump.
Donald J. Trump. You got it, Herschel. Well done. First he said Donald Trump Jr. somehow. That was great. And I really love the fire in Dr. Howard Fuller, who's a civil rights activist, an education reform advocate, an academic. He was on with Roland Martin Unfiltered, and he was on fire, and I loved it.
I'm a single issue voter. My single issue is Donald Trump. He is the most despicable ass human being walking the face of the earth. And all of y'all out here talking about 3 cents for gas. This man wants to destroy your personhood. And so there's got to be at least one of us out here that ain't explaining about the earned tax credit or the child tax. We're saying that this is a white supremacist who is trying to destroy everything that we have fought for over the last 50 years. And I ain't got time to explain to you every damn detail about policy. This man cannot be the president of the United States. We can talk about policy after we defeat his ass. You feeling me?
Hell yeah. Hell yes, I'm feeling you. That is awesome, Dr. Howard Fuller. I think I got to get him on stand up. All right, and finally, here is a bit from Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, the final one before the election.
Well, next week, the American people will decide if the next president will be Kamala Harris or if everyone at SNL will get audited. Former President Donald Trump, seen here being rescued after 30 days in a lifeboat.
That orange vest.
Gave a press conference from inside a garbage truck with his name on it. And my favorite part was when he tried to open the door of the truck but missed. Oh my God, he looks as drunk as I'm going to be Tuesday night. Then later at a rally, Trump said that he would protect women whether the women like it or not. For example, he's going to make everyone who's a danger to women wear an orange vest. And then during a rally yesterday, Donald Trump complained about his microphone and appeared to mime doing something very specific to it. See if you can guess. Take a look.
Yeah, this is where he blows the microphone.
Dude, even more embarrassing, the microphone immediately tapped him on the back of the head.
Oh, dear.
Donald Trump held a rally in Madison Square Garden, and honestly, it was all white. Speakers hurled insults at minority groups, used Nazi rhetoric, and suggested that Democrats should be slaughtered. But this lady's got a weird laugh, so I still can't decide. Trump defended himself from claims that he is a fascist, saying, I am the opposite of a Nazi. Yeah, but opposites attract, so you know what? Whatever. I don't care about that. I've been trying to figure out this whole time why Donald Trump even wants to be president. He's like 80 years old. His brain is mush. Somebody tried to kill him twice, and yet he's in a garbage truck pretending to like Wisconsin. What's in it for this guy? But then I realized if he doesn't win this race, he could go to jail. Like, literally. His sentencing is coming up right after the election. That's why he's blowing that microphone. He's trying to suck his way to freedom.
That's a great slogan.
Thank you.
Kamala Harris made the closing arguments in her campaign, delivering a speech with the White House in the background. And if you zoom in real close, you can see Joe Biden tied up inside. Also, during a Halloween event at the White House, President Biden playfully bit a baby who is dressed as a chicken. And then, moments later, Commander finished the job.
All right, there you go. Saturday Night Live this weekend. Good stuff, as always. All right, now it's time to get to my first guest. Coming up, I've got conversations with Eric Segall, Bill Boyle, and David Daley. But first, it's the host of the Daily Beans, Mueller, She Wrote, and clean up on aisle 45. Check her out everywhere. She's huge on Twitter and everywhere else. One of the most influential accounts and people in modern day political media. I was very happy to catch up with Dr. Allison Gill. Go let her know you heard her here on the show, as well as listen and subscribe to all of her work. Let's do it right now with Allison Gill. Dr. Allison Gill is back and as busy as always, so I'm very grateful that you are squeezing me in to talk to me. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. It's good to see you.
Okay, so we're hours before. 75 million people, I think I read, have already voted. Election day is tomorrow, and I just wonder if anybody out there is thinking about voting for Jill Stein. What would you say to them?
Oh, please don't. If you're into purity politics, I'll just let you know Jill Stein's running mate is anti-trans and floated the idea of a national abortion ban. So if you're trying to find a purity candidate, that's not the one. I think one Gen Z voter put it best that said, I don't agree with everything that Kamala Harris is for, but if we elect her, then I can get my foot in the door and I'll have a seat at the table and we can push them to be more progressive. And without her, it's Trump. It's her or Trump. And we all know what Trump brings with him. So
say a little more about what you think Gen Z is bringing. You're friends with that guy, Victor Shi, right? And obviously all these things, you cover all these things. And I wonder what role you think they are playing, especially I feel like since the switch. I feel like it really motivated young people. I've got anecdotes based on my own young daughters and their friends and other young people. But what do you think the role they're going to play or they are playing in this election is?
It's pretty big. If you've seen the numbers of the increase in Gen Z and young voters, it's massive. Even like just in Georgia, for example, they had 700,000+ people who voted this time that did not vote in 2020. And that's for a number of reasons. Some moved out of state, some came back. But a lot of these are first time voters and young people. That's 700,000+. And last time it was, I just need 11,780 votes. We know that's a great deal fewer than 700,000 plus. I think it just bodes well for the Harris campaign. And back when Obama was interviewed in 2016, shortly after Donald Trump won the Electoral College, he was asked, like, you're the hope guy. What gives you hope? And he said, the kids, the young people, that in 4 years and 8 years are going to be turning 18 and they're going to wash over this nation like a wave of hope. And I think he was right.
Yeah. And they feel rightfully screwed in a lot of ways. Hopefully that motivates them rather than disengages them. What do you think and talk about polling? How do you see it? How do you talk about it with your listeners and followers? And is there anybody that you trust? What does Allison Gill think about polling in general?
I generally don't. I generally advise people that polls don't vote and that we have to get out and vote. But I do pay attention to more trusted polling sources, not in any way to make any predictions or anything like that, and not to say we don't need to vote because the polls look good. Far from it. But this Iowa poll that came out late Saturday night for the Des Moines Register by Ann Selzer, I think threw the Republicans into a pretty big panic. because of another voting bloc. We talked about Gen Z, but these 65-year-old plus women are breaking heavily for Kamala Harris. And that is a voting bloc of women who were alive before Roe v. Wade was decided. And they know what our country looks like without Roe. They couldn't get credit cards. They couldn't have a bank account. They couldn't get a mortgage. And
told me like last year, my mom's almost 80. She told me she couldn't get a checking account without my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
and so I think we're not going back really resonates with them.
Yeah. You're saying 65 and older, and you're talking about that Iowa poll. What else does that Iowa poll portend? Because even if she doesn't win, what it says is there's a huge swing, a momentum. And it would seem like she's got a lot of momentum and he does not. He's had a lot of, I think, bad things come out in the past couple of weeks, and things in general just aren't going his way or helping him, whether it be the economy or any other October surprise or even the weather on voting day and the run up has been pretty mild. So what do you think about that? What was my question? Oh,
we'll start with Iowa because Ann Seltzer has her up 3 points. And in 2020, she had Trump up 7 points and he won by 9. And in 2016, she had him up 7 points and he won by 8. And so he was singing her praises. And even in 2023, she had him up 18 points over Biden and he loved her. But now, if history is prologue, if past is prologue, and she is as accurate as she has been, then that means Harris wins by 3 or 4 points in Iowa. Now, like you said, even if she doesn't, that closing that gap speaks volumes about these voting blocs in other parts of the country. And other things, you mentioned other things that Trump has been saying in his closing argument.
Yeah,
there's a new Univision poll that shows that more than half of Latinos that were polled are voting for Harris because of what was said at that Madison Square Garden rally. And 88% of the people polled heard the joke and 67, I think, percent were upset by it. So it's a combination of a lot of different things, I think.
I feel like there must have been a lot of Puerto Rican or Latino voters that were not paying any attention to the election or politics. And then they were like, wait, what did somebody say? They said Puerto Rico's a garbage. And that's all they heard. And Trump didn't apologize for it that night or anything. And it really, I think you tweeted out some data that seems to show it mattered.
Yeah. And further, taking it further, Puerto Ricans saw him in the garbage truck and saw that as him admitting that somebody said that at his rally and how insulting it was to just put himself in a garbage truck. His campaign is imploding. The rallies are getting smaller. I think tens of people showed up to the J.D. Vance rally today on Sunday.
I feel like that matters a lot. I feel like it matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. I think so, too. I really think it does.
It doesn't seem, none of this is scientific, really. Even polling, people talk about signs, and you can measure to some extent the operations and canvassing and so on. But those rallies matter. And you look at her rallies yesterday, today, every day since she's announced, by the way, and the stars and the energy in his, it's so different. And I feel like it means something else. And doesn't it mean something?
I feel like it means something, too. I know that stuff is anecdotal. It's qualitative, right? Not quantitative. But even on the quantitative front, with some of the polling, the New York Times admitted that they get a lot of polls that come back with Harris in quite a bit of a lead, and they spike those polls because they don't want to be wrong. And they only put forward the polls to the media that show that there's a close race because they're terrified. I think the New York Times was like, we're terrified. We're traumatized. The pollsters are traumatized by what happened in 2016 and 2016. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, the pollsters are traumatized? Yeah. How about the rest of us?
You mentioned women 65 and older. You look at these women in the streets from the Women's March, which I covered in 2017, to today. There was a Women's March. And then you see these lines, these pictures of these lines. And you, I look
Columbus,
at them.
Ohio, like places in Texas.
And I see all the women, black and white and everything else. And I decide, looking at those pictures, I'm like, yeah, I know why they're there. That's what I decide. I don't know if that's true, but it would seem that, and I've been saying it, and you can push back or tell me if you think it's wrong or you don't play this game, but I have no credibility and nothing to lose. I think it's going to be a landslide, and I think it's going to be a landslide because of women and people who support women. I think that's it. I think that's the whole ballgame. It's always been set in stone since the Supreme Court overturned women's reproductive rights. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the polls that we missed in the Seltzer polls, I talked about Trump being 18 points up on Biden and this latest one. But in between, there was one in September that showed that Harris had closed the gap. Trump was up by 4. And I believe Lawrence O'Donnell spoke about it. And then Morning Joe talked about it. And then I put out a tweet over a month and a half ago saying, I've been privately wondering if we might see flips in red states like Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, or Kansas. And I've been privately wondering that. Now I'm publicly wondering it. Yeah. And then we get this latest poll. I do think that the vibes matter. And recently I spoke on a podcast with Daria Dawson, who's the executive director of America Votes, which is a huge coalition. And they have knocked over 46 million doors. And I asked her what the vibes were like, because I want to know.
Matters. Yeah.
Yeah. Not somebody who talked to 483 likely voters on a landline on a Tuesday night. And she said the vibes are incredible. They're fantastic. I've never seen anything like it. Wow. And so those are the kinds of things, those more anecdotal but qualitative things that we can look at. But it's going to be interesting. I feel like a lot of people are afraid to be too optimistic, obviously, because of what happened in 2016. And all of the polls that we've seen, which a lot of them are garbage, say that it's a tight race or Trump is ahead, particularly in battleground states. So I think people might not be willing to go out on the limb like Ann Selzer did. But I'm with you. I think we might see something that we aren't used to seeing.
Okay, 2 more quick questions. What is your biggest concern on election night with Trump and the crimes that he is planning to commit? He's going to, I'm sure, announce at 9 p.m. that he won, or 10 p.m. or something. He'll say it's over, I won, everybody should go, whatever. But what is your concern for tomorrow night, election night?
Let's talk about the red mirage. We had it in 2020, we had it in 2016, but mostly in 2020, right? Because the in-person voters get counted first. It looks like Trump's ahead, and then Trump declares victory, and then the lead gets eaten away and overtaken. We called it the red mirage. If I may be so bold, in order to declare victory because you're ahead on election night, you actually have to be ahead on election night. What if he's not ahead? But to answer your questions about what I'm concerned about, obviously all the legal battles, if something can get up to the Supreme Court, I don't trust the Supreme Court. But we do have almost by twice as many, a huge legal team on the Harris-Walz campaign. And there's folks like Mark Elias out there working on the campaign. And those are our guardrails for the legal challenges, along with the judges, a lot of which Biden has appointed with our Senate that we had. But we got to hold that. We'll see. I'm also a little bit worried about what Mike Johnson and Donald Trump are cooking up about the counting of the electoral votes. Hopefully that will go smoothly. I'm worried that he's got something up his sleeve that we're too kind and law-abiding to imagine.
Yeah, we are naive to think that he doesn't have some kind of sneaky Elon Musk involved trick. Vladimir Putin, Elon Musk, they're all on a 3-way call planning like, no, don't worry, no matter what, even if she wins, we win. Somehow.
A new phrase, the November surprise, right? What's Trump going to do to try to steal the election?
Right. I guess I was going to ask you one last question about what are you most worried about with a second Trump term? But I think the better question for you is what you are advising Americans, listeners, followers of yours to do after the election, whether he or she wins. Obviously, there are different actions, but there's going to be a lot of issues, I'm sure, on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and after. Is there any general advice that you're giving people in different circumstances?
Just community. We all have this incredible community now, and we have each other. And there are a lot of us, and we can rely on each other. Those are my recommendations. And if you need a break, take a break. We got the watch.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks. Good to see you.
There you go, Dr. Allison Gill. Go listen to her on the Daily Beans, Mueller, She Wrote, and everything else that she does over at MSW Media. She is so good, and I was happy to have her joining me on the show. You know who else is always great? It's Professor Eric Segall, Georgia State University. He, of course, is a constitutional law expert. We had a lot of ground to cover in this short conversation. All these conversations are about 10 to 12 minutes, and Professor Segall was great to join me on a Sunday night. I gave him a call, and this is what it sounded like. Professor Eric Segall, please.
He's not around, but this is his alter ego, Mr. Scared Shitless About Everything. Yes, hello.
Oh, I'm so good to get you. That's exactly who I was looking for. This is the personality that I want. What are you scared of?
Everything.
Go ahead. To start it off, give me a scenario that you're scared of. You want to give me a Supreme Court scenario?
Sure. I'll just give you a little, I'm giving you the facts about this.
Okay.
About what made me nervous.
That's all we want.
I have a close friend who is a Georgia politics person, which I am not. I'm a federal law. I studied the federal Supreme Court, non-court. I fear the Congress, non-Congress, but I don't study state law. My close friend, who's been a lobbyist here for 25 years, told me on Friday, she said, did you vote early? I said, of course I voted early. She said, oh, good. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, they're receiving bomb threats and all kinds of threats of disaster now they've taken precautions, but like Georgia's going to be weird, Pete. It's going to be a weird couple of days here, I think. So I'm a little nervous about that. Lynn voted too, so I think we're good there. But I guess I'm mostly scared that it doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form what the reality is. I was just listening to that guy, Aaron Rupar. You know him on Twitter who follows all Trump's rallies?
He's been on the show a few weeks ago. He was on.
Great. Aaron's great. He's been doing God's work for years now.
Yeah, he's good.
Anyway, I watched his clip of Trump last night with Trump saying, or today, or whenever it was, with Trump very clearly saying one thing. And then 3 minutes later, of course, his team says he didn't say that, but he did. That's been happening for years. Pete, he is clearly 3 levels worse dementia-wise than he's been before. All the signs are there. It's just obvious. So that means somebody else is pulling the shots. And I know that anyway, because I told you 6 months ago, this whole Georgia Election Commission Board that the national media has made a thing about, and that really shouldn't, I'm not too worried about that particular thing. What I'm worried about is that wasn't Trump's idea. Trump did not go to somebody and say, I have an idea. Let's appoint these election deniers to Georgia to create a new agency and give them new powers and change the law. That's not Trump. Who is that? That's what I'm worried about.
Fair enough. Those are all.
I'm also terrified of J.D. Vance. He scares me.
Yeah, understandably. And he would likely become the president for any number of reasons, from the conspiracy or just idea that people say that if Trump wins, they'll pull him out, his own people, and put J.D. Vance in because that's who these tech billionaires, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, want, or he'll just die because he's old. But regardless, we don't know about that.
Can we go back to Peter Thiel and Elon Musk for a second, though?
Sure.
I'm not sure that they're the ones. So my brother, I'm just going to say this, my brother lives in the world, not of Peter Thiel and Musk, but of New York, Boston, Philadelphia, D.C., very kind of rich bankers and rich investment bankers. He lives in that world, the world I'm talking about there. Oh. And they're all, you're right, they all about 2 months ago started going for Trump. But I think there's something else going on, which is that people are underestimating this Opus Dei thing, not about the court. Forget the court. Fuck the court. It's not about the court. These people, Leo was given over $1 billion to pursue an agenda. He did not spend that money on the Supreme Court. He already got the Supreme Court. By the time he got $1 billion, he's been spending it in law schools and colleges and local Supreme Courts, like the Florida Supreme Court that I just spent 36 hours with last week. That was an experience. I wrote all about that. I'm actually more worried about the theocrats than I am about Trump.
You're more worried about the Opus Dei ultra Catholics led by Leonard Leo, and there's a whole bunch of them, obviously Samuel Alito and
they've already fucked us in permanent ways.
Oh, yeah.
Trump loses and he's gone and MAGA dissipates. 10 years from now, you know who won? Leonard Leo.
Yeah.
100%. And that scares me.
What else are you worried about in terms of Supreme Court scenarios that you think are?
Yeah. So an interesting thing happened. I wrote a piece for The Hill. I didn't send it to you. Sorry. But I wrote a piece for The Hill saying if the election is close and it goes to the court, there is no doubt what they will do. They will put Trump in power. And that's just obvious. And we shouldn't pretend otherwise. To which an election law expert, which I am not, I'm just a Supreme Court expert, an election law expert named Justin Levitt, who's really smart, wrote a thing for Rick Hasen's blog at the same time. We didn't talk to each other. We got dueling pieces within hours of each other. And his blog was like, people should stop worrying about the Supreme Court. It's not going to the Supreme Court. It would take only like one state. It would take like Bush versus Gore with one state being crucial and that kind of stuff. He may be right that it's unlikely. I didn't say anything about the likeliness of it. I just said if it happens, we know what's going to happen. But he's talking about a Bush versus Gore situation. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about this Georgia thing, for example, where they could do some pretty terrible stuff here in Georgia. And if the Georgia Supreme Court upheld it, the court is not going to overturn that if it helps the Republican Party. It's those kinds of cases I'm worried about, where state Supreme Courts clearly violate federal law by allowing Republicans to win, and the Supreme Court says, oh, that's fine, we don't care. That's what I'm worried about. That happened in a very miniature way in Pennsylvania last week when they let Pennsylvania change its rules at the last minute. It didn't matter in terms of votes, that it was obsolete about that, but people were surprised that the justices went with the Republicans in that case. Not so. I'm worried about those little lawsuits popping up that are clearly against federal law.
What about that Supreme Court decision last week about Virginia that allowed them to purge voters at the last minute? That seemed unprecedented.
That was bad. I said Pennsylvania, but I meant Virginia.
You did mean Virginia. Okay,
correction.
That's what you meant. All right, so you asked and answered.
You saved
asked and answered. Okay,
that's because I'm keeping track of like 10 states.
Trying to, yeah. And you mentioned Georgia in terms of the security issues and so on, but in terms of the get out the vote and what you've seen this cycle versus previous cycles there, any other guesses about the momentum?
Lynn went canvassing today. The numbers in Georgia for women voting is way up, but the number of people voting in rural counties is way up. So I don't know how you think rural counties are Trump for sure. You'd hope women are overwhelmingly for Trump. How that all Pete, you know what? I in preparation for this, I actually just spent a lot of time looking at reasonable polling people, like people I think are reasonable. No one knows anything.
Right. No one knows anything. But the one thing that I've felt like I've known for a long time is something that you've been instrumental in talking about for a long time, which is the issue of abortion and Roe v. Wade and the decision that overturned it. And that being the thing that animates people more than anything. And that we didn't need the punditry of a billion people for since that was overturned. We knew the day the Supreme Court overturned Roe that women were going to be coming out in droves and voting, and it would make
hold on. You and me knew that. Sorry, you and I knew that.
I didn't know. I assumed that would be the issue.
Let me finish. There are a lot of progressive law professors, good friends of mine, great people, smarter than I am, but not on this issue, who fought with me about that for decades.
Yeah.
Decades.
But not about but they fought with you about the issue that if it were overturned, that people would be motivated.
My position has been since 1990 or 91 that women in the law, there's short-term pain. I never ever said there wouldn't be short-term pain, which has been terrible pain in the wake of Dobbs. Terrible. But in the long run, looking at a 30-year time period, women are better off in this country with Roe and Casey off the books, and it's not close. On every issue other than abortion, they're better off. And even on abortion 15 years from now, which is not to say the women dying and the women who can't get abortions is not a tragedy, but we were getting there anyway. Women couldn't get abortions in Alabama 10 years ago, Pete.
Right.
Women could not get abortions in Alabama 10 years ago, not easily. So we didn't change the world that much. Blue states still allow abortions. Red states still don't. But it took the abortion issue and it flipped it from a thing that helps Republicans to a thing that helps Democrats. And that's what we're seeing. And progressive women who are pro-choice, or progressive men like you and me who are pro-choice, I am radically pro-choice, but I'm more radically pro-woman across the board. And abortion destroyed politics for women across the board. So I'm glad that's gone. I think it's the right thing. It's going to take a while for it to go there. But I was wondering, I just asked someone this, a political person on Twitter. What I don't understand is why, maybe you can answer this, why haven't the Democrats in Congress pushed loudly and publicly to repeal the Comstock Act? Make the Republicans defend, because what people are saying is if Trump gets into power and both houses go Republican, they're going to fucking outlaw abortion drugs. And that's going to be terrible. Now, again, that will lead to political gains for Democrats, but I'm not willing to have that balance, because outlawing abortion drugs in America tomorrow would be an absolute disaster. Why aren't the Democrats making more hay of this, Pete? Wouldn't that be a great issue for them?
Comstock Act of 1873.
Yes. No one ever uses it, but the Republicans are saying they're going to use it to have a national abortion ban.
Yeah.
That's the law that would basically stop abortion drugs from going in the mail.
Isn't the effort to codify Roe similar to the effort that would mean the same result?
My idea is better. Don't codify Roe. If you codify Roe, that's going to hurt Democrats again. No. Just repeal the Comstock Act. Pete, 60% of abortions are now done through drugs, and I think the number is actually higher than that. We need these abortion drugs to be freely available.
Right.
Like that, we really do. And the Comstock Act might stop, but forgetting abortion, leaving aside the issue of abortion, isn't that a winner for them?
I don't know. I'm going to have to ask some of my abortion rights activist friends about that strategy. But okay, cool. Maybe I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Is there anything else?
The one thing I would watch is North Carolina. Okay. The people I know tell me that if the Dems win North Carolina for some reason, that means everything. I don't really know why, but watch North Carolina.
Got it. Love that tip.
All right.
Appreciate you,
my friend.
Enjoy dinner. Thank you. All right, there he goes. Professor Eric Segall, always great. And you know who else is? Bill Boyle. That's what's coming up next. Go follow and support Segall. Listen to his podcast, by the way, Supreme Myths. And now it's time to get to our friend Bill B. in D.C. He doesn't really have anything to plug outside social media. You can find him on Twitter and Blue Sky. If you need anything when you're in D.C., reach out to our friend Bill. He owns parking garages. He's a businessman, is all he is. But he's real smart. And we always love talking to him. He's a very valuable member of our community, often joins us at the Hangouts. I caught up with him on Sunday. We had a great conversation. I started off by asking my friend Bill what things look like in Washington, D.C. just a day before Election Day.
Feel the love. You can feel it. You can feel the deep concern that something quite bad could happen in the next few days here.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even think to ask you about the precautions they might be taking there, but that's the inevitable riot if the Eagles win.
Correct. Exactly. It's,
is that all? Obviously, I would imagine it's all for the MAGA people who are going to do something similar. What concerns do you have either way about security, about people acting out, committing crimes, vandalism, etc.?
The Antifa rioting sucked, but it was not a thing that happened right after in response to Trump originally getting elected. When Trump first got elected in 2016, there were protests, especially only after he actually was inaugurated and tried to do the Muslim ban. So I don't think there's a significant concern that if in the disastrous outcome he wins the election, that Democrats are going to be out here burning buildings. That just didn't happen before. And I don't think anyone expects that to happen this time. I do think that the concern is that MAGA people will assault the city like they did demonstrably multiple times. It wasn't just January 6th. December 12th of 2019, there was of 2020, there was rioting in D.C. by the Proud Boys. No one thinks it's going to be the left or the Democrats that are going to do the rioting. They think it's Trump's people, and they've got a record for doing it, and they're saying they're going to do it, by the way. We're getting security warnings from D.C. police and from Department of Homeland Security and all the businesses in D.C. They're being very clear who they think it's going to be that's going to do it.
In terms of the outcome, in terms of predictions, at this point, aside from polling, which has things close everywhere, depending on how you look, and you can note momentum. The only thing I really want to ask you about polling is how important that Iowa poll that on Saturday night came out and it blew up on social media that had Kamala Harris winning in Iowa. And apparently it's a very reliable polling person. Yep. And I guess the important point that I took away from it was even if she doesn't win Iowa, the point there is the momentum and the swing in a state like Iowa. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, that's totally fair. And what Iowa often does is tell you what's going to happen in a place like Wisconsin and Michigan. It's the Midwestern rurals and older women in particular, which way they're going to vote. Now, Ann Stelter's poll had Harris winning by 3. The kind of poll that Trump would have wanted to have in Iowa to make him feel good about the outcome would have been Trump winning Iowa by more than 8, significantly more than 8. If he was winning by 10 in Iowa, you would say, okay, he's killing it with people in western Wisconsin that may make the difference in this election. So even if Ann Stelter's wrong by 5, it's still an incredibly bad result. In fact, even if she was wrong by 10, it's a really bad result for Trump. And there's no way to get around that. Now, the New York Times Siena polling that came out, they're saying Stelter's underestimating the white male voters, and that may be that's what they think she might be getting wrong. What's interesting about that, though, is that their polling they did yesterday, or this morning, that they announced, still has Trump losing. There's a lot of reasons for. I think the Trump people are freaking out, and I think they have a lot of good reasons to freak out. I think the momentum is going their way, and You were saying, like, besides the polling, what other things? What
other metrics? The one thing I don't think too much about this, but like his rallies, his arenas there are not a lot of people at them. They crowd everybody up in front, and that seems to be momentum. And like every time in the last few weeks, they seem like they're not that full, even though Mark Levin said on social media, 30,000 people at the arena in Wisconsin and Milwaukee that only holds 18,000, Bill.
Yeah, I saw you pointed that out. That's awesome.
Such a dick. But the point is, you see a lot of empty spaces. There was a video that went viral yesterday where he said that we're filling these places up. And then the cameraman turned as he was saying at the show that about a third of the place, the entire top tier, was empty. I don't know if that matters at all. Get out the vote. From what I'm hearing, there's just not a lot of really effective operations. Apparently, Elon Musk pulled his operation. I don't know.
He basically can't.
Yeah, what happened with that, and what are the other metrics outside of polling that you're paying attention to?
So the Dems have a polling app, a Get Out the Vote app called Minivan, and it's really great at giving you your route.
I use it.
Sending you directly to Democratic houses. And I can tell you, I've been talking to people today who are canvassing in Pennsylvania outside of Pittsburgh. There's a lot of 50-50 places outside of Pittsburgh, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. And what these guys are seeing out there is nobody doing Get Out the Vote for the Republicans. They're not seeing any literature on doorsteps. They're just not, it's just not there. And, Get Out the Vote is the kind of thing that when everybody does it, it might push the numbers by 1/3% or something. That would be that's the split ticket guy's estimate. Where it matters is if you're not doing it and the other guy is. You could see some really surprising things come out of that, maybe, right? And again, everything I'm saying should be caveated. I think you'd rather be Harris. This is a good example of it. But we won't know until the fat lady sings, till we've run through the tape and everyone who can possibly vote for her has voted. But besides the Get Out the Vote, where clear, and by the way, there's other people, you can go on Twitter and find all these Democrats going, wow, like I'm out here canvassing and I'm not seeing any of the opposition. Other things you're seeing, or that I'm seeing that really I think are interesting is, for instance, the Trump campaign called the New York Times Siena poll an attempt at voter suppression. And they've been doing this the last 2 days. I know from people who are familiar with people in his campaign that they were very cocky a week to 10 days ago, and that they are now not, that they're freaking out. They're probably seeing numbers that scare the crap out of them. And as an indicator of that is that Trump is going to be in North Carolina 4 times in the last 3 days of the campaign. North Carolina, that's a defensive move. You're in North Carolina because you think you're losing at this point, not if you think you're winning. You have to win. He can't just hold on to North Carolina and win the race. He has to win Pennsylvania too. And so if North Carolina was solid and he felt good about it, he wouldn't be there. He would be in Pennsylvania. And by the way, he's also going to Georgia, which I think they're terrified of. So I think at this stage, you see where they're going, where their schedule is, where they're stopping and doing rallies. And I think it tells you that they're very worried that they're losing the South. And he's been to Wisconsin twice in 3.5 weeks. To me, Wisconsin would be the place. If you're going on offense, that is the best place. And they haven't gone. They've barely been there. And I think they aren't because they think they can't, because they think they have to try to shore up their position in the South. The other thing is, you look at their messaging in this last couple of days. It's an awful fucking bloody mess.
Wow, so
you've got RFK talking about fluoridating the water, and Trump's taking fluoride out of the water like he's General Ripper in a fucking 60s movie, and Trump endorsed it. Like, that's your closing message, is we're going to do some weird Bircher thing from back in the day to take fluoride out of the water?
I haven't seen a lot about this, but did you see that apparently Jeffrey Epstein said that Trump was his closest friend for 10 years? That seems like an October surprise to me. And it's no surprise that they were friends, that they were friendly. We've seen the videos. We know that they were friendly for a long time. But these audio tapes coming out of him saying that, it's like a dead man speaking from the past to affect the election. I don't know that it affects the election. It came out late. Richard Wolff, I don't know. It's not a question of his reliability because that's Jeffrey Epstein on the tape, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's going to affect things now. I think the bigger things that are killing them, it's the fluoridation. It's Trump saying, I was not actually miming a blowjob at my rally the other day. Like putting out a public statement saying I wasn't giving a blowjob to a microphone.
He did?
Yes. He's saying he should not have left office in 2020. Like he's saying, he's just confirming all of the things that everyone hates about him. And then on top of that, the Madison Square Garden rally, I suspect is going to go down as one of the biggest mistakes in political history. It will if they lose, for sure. And that's my only doubt about it is if somehow he pulls out a win. I think he's losing, and I think that the Garden will be what everybody looks back and says that's where they screwed themselves. And I'll tell you, there are 500,000 Puerto Rican voters in Pennsylvania. 500,000. There, I am hearing lots and lots about how that vote is really turned against Trump since the Madison Square Garden. And fascinatingly, there's an article out there today, I think the Times somewhere, where they were talking to people and they were saying that Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania were saying, what was this bullshit with the garbage truck? If he said that he didn't believe or agree with calling us garbage, what's he doing in a garbage truck the next day? And so they don't
realize the Joe Biden comments about Trump supporters. They're just connecting what they heard about garbage and garbage truck.
Yeah, and they see the garbage truck.
It's a good point.
They think that he's endorsing the comedian's joke.
Yeah, yes. Why wouldn't they if they're not paying close attention to the news cycle, which they're not? A lot of those Puerto Rican voters, I'm going to guess, weren't even paying attention to the election, weren't planning maybe even on voting at all.
And you literally have Bad Bunny, J-Lo, Mark, whatever. Like every major
all the biggest
Puerto Rican
social media
figure came out and said, fuck this guy. Like, fuck. And I just think that when I saw him in the garbage truck, I immediately said, that's a really fucking bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a pretty plugged in, obnoxiously obsessed with all of this stuff guy. And I just saw that and said, man, I'm going, why would he associate himself with that in any way?
Yeah.
He should have given a bitter, somber speech about how it's so terrible that Americans are mean to each other. And if he had only known about this comedian, he would have stopped it and he'd have been fine. But I think he really burned himself on that. And I think the campaign is just careening along. The Madison Square Garden event, clearly nobody was in charge of looking at who was going to say what.
Right.
So you had just this list of lunatics saying crazy shit to America in your last 10 days of a campaign. Almost perfectly timed, by the way, for where if it went really wrong, you don't have a lot of time to fix it.
Final thought before the election. I probably won't tape an interview. I'm sure I'll be talking to you nonstop. But final thought before Tuesday for folks listening.
I think there's a higher chance that Harris wins and wins substantially than there is of Trump winning with any comfort at all. I think if he wins, he is very tiny margins that he wins by. I think if she wins, I suspect it's going to be a pretty solid win.
Yeah.
And I don't think Iowa is out of reach. A thing people need to remember about Iowa, tariffs screwed Iowa farmers. Iowa has an incredibly bad abortion law that people are voting for or voting about in this election. And the tariff relief that they gave to Iowa farmers was risibly, badly, terribly managed.
Right.
I think it would not surprise me in the slightest if she eked out Iowa by half a point.
Bill Boyle, love talking to you. Appreciate you doing this real quick with me on last moment notice, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, brother. Bella ciao.
What does that mean?
It means hello, beautiful. It's an Italian anti-fascist song, which I think everyone should look up.
Should have known. Thank you, sir.
All right. See ya.
Ciao Bella is hello, beautiful. So I guess I got mixed up. There he goes, Bill Boyle. Always great. Bill B in D.C. Love when he joins the show. And finally, my fourth guest that I had a short conversation with is, last but certainly not least, he is brilliant. He is an author, most recently of a really good book, Anti-Democratic Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections. He also wrote Rat Fucked, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and Unrigged, Why Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy. Is the former editor-in-chief of Salon.com. He's written articles recently for the LA Times, the New Republic, and so much more. I'll link to everything about David Daley in the show notes. Let's do it right now with David Daley. All right. I've got David Daley as a part of my day before election extravaganza show. That's what I'm calling it, David. We workshopped it a lot and focus grouped it, and everybody thought that would be the most effective way to describe what we're doing. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. You've interrupted my week-long red wine and apple cider donut binge, which is the only way I'm getting through this.
That should be the question that I should be asking everybody. How are you getting through this week and the hours up until election? So most people are going to listen to this. It's going to be a day or less than a day before we start to get results in. And I wanted to ask you a series of quick questions that you know a lot about. First of all, you've written a lot, obviously, about gerrymandering and how it distorts democracy. How does that play out in this election, and where do you want to pick?
It's a great question, and what not enough people, I think, are talking about as we focus on the presidential election. Control of the House is going to be very close. And once again, even though it's going to be a 50-50 election, Republicans hold a huge advantage thanks to the maps that they were able to draw themselves back in 2021. Republicans had the power to draw more than twice as many districts as Democrats in 2021, so they already started with an advantage. And in the course of the last year, they have added a brand new gerrymander in the state of North Carolina, which could turn North Carolina's 7-7 even map into an 11-3 Republican map on Tuesday night. So even if Democrats are able to take the House, it's going to mean not just winning the 4 seats they need to take control, but the extra 4 seats that Republicans just handed themselves. There's a couple of new seats, Alabama, Louisiana, that will be fairer now that racial gerrymanders there have been unwound, but Republicans still hold a big advantage there. The other reason why this matters, of course, is that if there is election chicanery facing the presidential election, it's likely going to come from these gerrymandered state legislatures. That's where so much of the trouble could begin. And under the nightmare scenario, if this election winds up in the U.S. House, say it winds up in the House because there's disputes over close elections that go barely Kamala Harris's way in either Wisconsin, Arizona, or Georgia. Republicans control the congressional delegations from those 3 states. And if this goes to the House, the vote is not by individual member, it's by delegation. So Wisconsin could be a close Harris victory, but if the members of Congress are voting, it's going to be a 6-2 vote to give Wisconsin's electors to Donald Trump.
The situation, I think what I'm hearing you say is that if your district and your seat is gerrymandered, it's a lot easier to get away with chicanery. It's a lot easier to do things because your seat is so safe. No one's going to hold it against you. You're always going to win.
If you can get away with a lot because you will always win, but you also get a different kind of legislator from these non-competitive districts. You get more radical believers in the big lie and election denialism. I don't think that there's any coincidence between the fact that so much of this election denialism arises once you have these kinds of extreme radicalized lawmakers drawn from non-competitive districts, winning primaries that are held in early July that are open only to Republicans. Maybe there's 11 candidates. They might be elected with 18% of the vote. So It's a fraction of a fraction who are choosing these radicals who then go off and deny election results.
You've laid out at the New Republic and on social media, and you've talked about this, the scenarios that could happen and end up at the Supreme Court. You've talked about the past and potential for the future. But I feel like you already said, and a lot of people are saying, if the margins are much bigger, larger in a state like Wisconsin, in any of these states, if it comes down to one state, then it doesn't matter how maybe big the margin is, or maybe it does. But if there's a few states where the margin is much bigger for her in this case, it'll be a lot harder for any chicanery, any Supreme Court interference, right? That's the pretty conventional wisdom. If she wins big, there's not a lot he can do.
I think that's right. If
or the Supreme Court
big,
can do.
He'll try. Very little he can do that even this Supreme Court will be willing to touch. And that means as big as Joe Biden won in 2020, right? 20,000 votes in Wisconsin, 11,700 in Georgia, 10,400 in Arizona. And the court wasn't going to go near that decision. It would have meant messing around with results in 3 different states. Not even Sam Alito would do that after a red wine binge with Paul Singer after salmon fishing in Alaska.
Right. Fair enough. What else are you thinking about and concerned with playing out any state and with any demographic? Are you in the prediction game at all? Because I've been saying I think she's going to win big. I think polling it's not a science. And I think what is enthusiasm, and you just seem to see it everywhere in the crowds that turn out, at her appearances, in the door knocking, in the canvassing, in the organization. They seem very disorganized and so on. I also feel like she's just got a lot of momentum with different things going on. He had a MAGA hate rally, which is compared to Nazis, and we just found out he's Jeffrey Epstein's best friend, and dressed up as in a garbage truck, and losing the Puerto Rican vote potentially. It just seems like momentum's going in her favor, and they're not as organized. But those are my overall observations. So what do you think, David Daley?
I think those are great observations, and I think that certainly your observations could be within the margin of error. I don't know the answer anymore. We've seen so many things over these years that we all thought would be disqualifying for Donald Trump, and it seems as if nothing ever is. So you have just rattled off a half dozen reasons that Donald Trump is unfit and his campaign seems to be losing ground. But whether that will translate into votes, I guess we will see Tuesday night. I am not in the predictions business. I think it's tough, and we will find out soon enough. I think the polls in Iowa certainly suggest that you could be absolutely right, but I worry. I am a worrier by nature. And so I look at this court. I will be watching to see if they use a version of the independent state legislative theory in any of these cases that perhaps tries to rehabilitate this discredited zombie notion to try to knock down anything that a state Supreme Court does to ensure that the election is fair in a close state. But I'm with you. I have been plenty nervous over these weeks, but I'm allowing myself in these final hours to be optimistic and hopeful. Which is not like me. So let's do it.
You're filled with wine and donuts. That teeters you one way or the other, I would imagine. But
yeah,
pick a media story over the past few weeks, from the lack of endorsements by the Washington Post and LA Times owned by billionaires to any other narrative that you're seeing, which is good or bad, playing out. There's so many things to look at, and we can section off media and categorize it from corporate media, right-wing media, liberal media, whatever we want to say, the legacy media like the newspapers. But what have you watched that you've thought, oh, that's good, that's bad, or a trend or anything regarding media coverage of this campaign?
What I'm watching is that over the course of these last several weeks, coverage of Trump's rallies has been much more honest. I have found that the Times and the Post have been willing to describe what it is that they are seeing, and that they're not, Parker Malloy of the New Republic coined that amazing term of sane washing earlier in the campaign, in which the media was going to the two or three things that seemed normal in the Trump rally and quoting those and pretending that these crazy events were just business as usual and ignoring all of the other pieces. And I've been reading story after story in which the lunacy of the Donald Trump weave is on full display. And it has been a great thing to see. I think really important that we have stopped sane washing what he's saying, and that the press is presenting it in full for the American people to get a glimpse of.
Yeah, it helps when the former chief of staff and former joint chiefs are calling the guy a fascist, which fascism experts have been saying for years. But it gives cover to the New York Times and Jake Tapper and CNN and everybody else to use the effort.
Tapper's been fantastic when he's had some of these right-wingers on, when he's had Mike Johnson on, when he's had
J.D. Vance. He was good with
J.D. Vance on. Was it Tapper who had Chris Sununu? No, it wasn't a Sununu. It was a Glenn Youngkin. And he's just refused to let these guys dodge and weave. And here's hoping that's a trend that continues.
There was one weird moment when that Tapper missed it. We all miss him. But I think he missed it. J.D. Vance accused Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlanta of being a discredited journalist in terms of his reporting of what John Kelly said. And I want to be, Tapper didn't yell. John Kelly called Michael Schmidt of the New York Times and let him record him. And then we all heard the recordings of John Kelly saying Trump's a fascist. Also, you once called him a Nazi. Come on.
Yeah, no, Republicans have really double down on this idea that we can't trust what it is that we see right in front of us, right? Vance has been caught in hundreds and hundreds of lies. And I think that's really important for us to be aware of moving forward. Even if Donald Trump loses on Tuesday night, if he loses big and this is over, Trumpism is not dead. And what Trump has done to our institutions is going to take a long time to heal. The trust that has been intentionally evaporated from the news media, so much of what has gone on, there are still very real dangers here, even if we win. And if we win, we shouldn't think that this is something. Well,
that's a conversation I'm looking forward to having with you after she wins, victory. Because what changes in the media and how has the public's trust eroded in institutions, including obviously media and government, and can it heal? And
much
so how?
Fairly, don't get me wrong. Yeah.
David Daley, appreciate your time doing this real quick on a Sunday evening. I hope you're right about everything, and I will check in with you right after the election or on the night. You'll stop by our hangout if you'd like.
I will. I'll just got to get some more donuts.
Thank you, buddy.
Bye.
All right, there he goes, David Daley. Thank you very much, sir, as well as Bill B. in D.C., of course, Eric Segall, and the great Dr. Allison Gill. 4 great guests for you. How about it? Who's doing the work? It's me putting it together for you on a Sunday night for this Monday show, and I'll be back tomorrow and hosting the Hangout, I think, starting at 7 o'clock. Look for the email from me if you're a subscriber. If you're not, join now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Thanks again to my guest and for your support, everybody. You guys are the best. I hope you're hanging in there. Check us out on the Discord platform where the conversation always is happening. You're never alone if you're a member of the stand-up community. And I will be right here with you each and every day this week and for the rest of your damn life. How about it? All right. Thank you for your support, Bumblebees, listening all the way to the end. I hope you appreciated it. I love you. Talk to you tomorrow. John Carroll writes and performs all the music. Go support him, johncarroll.org. Take it away, Johnny.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't in sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Oh, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.